Yeah, I couldn't think of an intro to this video. It's The Incredibles. Hi everyone, I'm Fez Yep, and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about how incredible the Incredibles games are. In the early 2000s, every other movie was trying to push themselves into video games. They're related media. Why not push your mediocre movie into an even shittier video game form? The kids will love it. I know I did. Some of the most popular, or abundant, video game spin-offs were kids' movies and TV shows. It was easy. Kids are stupid. From SpongeBob actually having really great games, to Ed, Edd n Eddy. Even Courage the Cowardly Dog had a cancelled game, and Pixar was no different. I mean, if you had movies like Toy Story, you'd do the same. Just look at Jesse's Wild West Rodeo. Yeah, whichever studio developed Abortion deserves Game of the Year. Not all Pixar games were made equal. Some were certainly better than others, which is something I can't say for the movies, which are almost all bangers. Pixar did have some quality games though. I particularly played The Incredibles over and over as a kid. So, I've gone ahead and returned to it. While I only ever played the original Incredibles growing up, I figured since I have such fond memories of it and all of its sequels, they had to still be incredible. Yeah, so when is Abortion 2 coming out? The Incredibles games have their weak points, but looking at them as a whole, they're actually pretty incredible. And it all started with The Incredibles game, which was released in October 2004, is a 3D action-adventure game, which is something you'll come to expect from every kid's movie video game moving forward. This game is pretty much the same as I remember. Mr. Incredible stages are abundant and completely deliver action-adventure gameplay, to Dash and Violet not having many stages. And the ones they do have are terrible. I remember the Dash levels being a lot of fun. In fact, they were my favorite part of the game growing up. But now they're a broken mess, they're hard to control, and I found myself dying to the same thing over and over due to Dash just not wanting to do what I tell him to do. Which is exactly what you want out of a video game. Mrs. Incredible stages aren't too bad, although they're weaker than Mr. Incredible stages. By far the worst stage in the game is the Violet stage. I mean, it felt like a chore to beat. The 100-mile dash was already hard enough. I don't need this level too. Lucky Violet becomes more fun in future games. There's also the Incredible level, which is somehow more fun than Violet's stage and much more consistent than either of Dash's. I just wish the Incredible could take more hits than it can. I'm trying to run through enemies with my hamster ball, damn it. You almost entirely play as Mr. Incredible in this game, and for good reason. He has the most solid gameplay out of the entire family. Not to mention the boss fights against the Omni Droid are actually kind of fun. And getting to see that body too. So let's take a look at exactly what the game has to offer. This game adds quite a bit to the story in order to make it a decent game, which is something that later games do much more frequently. We start off as Mr. Incredible, of course. The entire tutorial level is full of beating up Bon Voyage's henchmen. Although I found it's faster to just ignore them and keep moving through the level, which is a technique I actually learned from girls in middle school. Hold on, you're telling me they went through the trouble of making a Frozone model? And he isn't even playable? I swear, I'm at my wit's end trying to figure out why all these buildings have fatal lasers in them. No wonder the Supers got sued. Look at this is cruel. The end of the level is decent, mostly just throwing bombs back at the henchmen. Can't wait to see Buddy though. I would love to see a minigame flying around with Buddy. Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward level. Do what the narrator tells you and you'll be just fine. The second stage is the tutorial for Mrs. Incredible. I imagine this would set us up for a game full of playing as her, but sadly she only gets 3 stages in the game. Maybe that's for the best though. I did find myself randomly dying as her. I also can't stand her lines in this game.
What's sending those bad boys a-flying?
God help me. Now this is where we find that the cutscenes in the game are just compressed video files from the first movie. Oh hey, here's that minigame. Yeah, I couldn't figure out how to dodge obstacles here for the life of me. Tanking them is the best way to get out of this. The boss fight is fine, but it's a little underwhelming. I wanted a fist fight here. Just look at this pose though. Now here we see Mr. Beta suing the Soups. I like to think this guy is the one who jumped off the building. Hopefully someday we get this guy's in-game model in Gary's mod. After this we get to see Bob's fat body for the first time. We get to see Frozone, but not play as him. And goons in the burning building for some reason. Don't quite remember these guys from the movie, but that's... Wait. Hey, wait a second! That's the guy from the newspaper! and he'll probably sue again after this. I mean, look at him. The next stage is the first dash stage, and boy, do I have some words for whoever designed this shit. This first one is actually the better dash stage. The environment is better put together, but it doesn't make it a well done stage. Death after death after death, to the same damn things. I mean, Dash is always going against me here. Also, his feet heat up way too fast. Not much else to say here. Sonic 06 did it way better. Oh look, it's Fat Bob! This stage was a doozy. I could never figure out this zipline. And for whatever reason, it took me way too long to figure out I actually had to shoot the mothership up there. I mean, so much time was wasted shooting the missiles. After this is the first Omnidroid boss fight, and it's actually incredibly fun. It feels dangerous, and the lava definitely helps the atmosphere. From here on, we lose Fat Bob, which is the second biggest mistake this game has made, right behind the serious lack of Frozone. I'm not really sure why, but the second fight against the Omnidroid was the laggiest and slowest time of my life. Not a critique of the game, but holy hell, it was the worst experience of my life. Pausing the game or restarting did absolutely nothing for it either. We do some more of this, some more of that, blah blah blah. Mrs. Incredible gets here. Pretty much the same as the first time we saw her, not as good as Mr. Incredible. Finally, the 100-mile dash. Holy guacamole, it was terrible. The enemies behind you are no threat at all. They miss every single shot, which is kind of like me in Battlefield. But the real threat here is the environment. Every rock and tree in the level are out to get you, and Dash does not know how to dodge. Boosting will kill you, but going slow will run out the timer. This level is seriously a broken mess. Sonic 06 Mach Speed levels are broken, but at least they're playable. This is something else. The Violet level is up next, and it is somehow worse. Her invisibility lasts like half a second at best, and she has no shield abilities at all. It takes one hit. Violet is absolutely useless. Hamster Ball stage. Do some of this, do some of that. Final boss fight. It isn't much different from the other Omnidroid fights, except that it's bigger and more in the city this time. Also, the soundtrack of the game is fantastic. It sounds like it's straight from the movie. Not surprising when they're both composed by the same person, Michael Giacchino? I think that's how I pronounce his name. All this adding to the story was mentioned in the bonus video of the game. They include a trailer for the movie and a short clip of the developers talking about the development of the game. Wouldn't mind having a conversation with them too. I have some words about the cutscenes just being compressed video files. I mean, come on guys, no kid is playing this before watching the movie. Do something cool like Rise of the Underminer. Cutscenes are the only thing Underminer did better. Overall, this is a pretty good game. It's as faithful to the movie as they could have been, while still making something fun. Would have been much more fun to play as Frozone, but hey, that's what the Game Boy version is for. The Incredibles for the Game Boy. I've heard worse, and there certainly was worse, as The Incredibles was the 31st best-selling Game Boy Advance game of all time. I mean, that's out of 1,538. I'd say it's decent. The game is fun, although the only bad part was the Violet stage again. No surprise there. She just walks from start to finish, trying not to die, with no attacks and an invisibility that practically lasts half a second. She's just getting shot the entire time. The dash gameplay is actually pretty fun here. Quickly dodging attacks and using super speed feels pretty satisfying. Mr. Incredible takes a spotlight here again, of course, having the most stages and gameplay that's actually pretty fun. Charging through Game Boy goons is satisfying and sometimes pretty difficult. I mean, these guys will come at you with miniguns. I swear, all of the problems in the Incredibles universe could have just been solved with a Glock. And this guy gets a minigun? I actually didn't like Mrs. Incredible here at all, something that does not stick around for the other games. Constantly climbing the walls felt like a chore compared to everyone else having pretty straightforward gameplay. Even Frozone, who is really more of a minigame in other people's stages rather than having his own stages, is actually really fun here, though I constantly missed his jumps. So I'm bad at video games, who cares? You guys are bad at liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You really should start practicing. Knocking the enemy's weapons out of their hands is the way to go here, especially if you're Mr. Incredible, who has no reach at all. Don't get me started on those drones being just barely out of reach. I actually found myself dying in this game way more than I expected, with a couple game overs at that. Look, you can see me emulating. The game starts us off as Mr. Incredible saving that one lady's cat. You know, because he has time. It follows the same path as the normal game, fighting goons on rooftops, but there's some added bonuses. They have guns this time. Hey, it's Frozone! Apart from missing literally every single jump, definitely on purpose, This is actually pretty fun, although it is a little underwhelming, but don't worry, they fix Frozone later. The fight against Bomb Voyage was everything I wanted from the regular game. I mean, listen to it! He makes French noises when he's punched! For being on the Game Boy, the boss fights with the Omni Droid are pretty well made, though this double shot is almost impossible to dodge. Lots of bad guys are beaten up, lots of ledges are climbed, and Dash actually gets to attack the enemies this time around. Violet is beyond useless again, and before you know it, we're at the end of the game. Now this is the one time Violet is actually useful. She saves civilians from rocks falling. However, she's also the only character here who doesn't directly go against the Omni Droid. I mean, even Frozone gets attacked by it. A lot of this game was really repetitive, though that sort of thing fits for a Game Boy game based on a movie. Besides, the next game screams repetition. While the movie got a sequel 14 years later, the game got a sequel the next year. And it is a downgrade. The Incredibles Rise of the Underminer is definitely a video game. Releasing in November 2005, it isn't bad, but it's so forgettable. I mean, they did so much right with the first game. Everything except Violet. Here, it's just the same thing over and over again. While it feels like the first game in some respects, there was just something about the first game that felt great. Now, I get what they were going for here. The camera angle is fixed and from above, with two playable characters. They were going for a fun experience with a friend, preferably two kids who actually like The Incredibles and didn't just get this game from an out-of-touch aunt. I respect the vision for the game, but there are other games that do the same exact thing but better, like Shrek Super Slam that released in the same year. I would do anything for this video to be about Shrek. Rise of the Underminer does throw Frozone into the mix, which is a plus. He's a lot more fun to play than Mr. Incredible here, with more maneuverability and the ability to freeze enemies. I found myself predominantly playing as Frozone to keep him alive, while I let Mr. Incredible keep dying most of the time. The game takes place directly after the first movie ends, with Mr. Incredible and Frozone both going underground to take on the Underminer and his swarms of robots. Imagine having an army of robots big enough to take on a small nation, and you get folded by a dude in a red costume and a side character. Frozone deserves his own movie, and I know I'm not the only one who thinks so. The personalities of the two are actually pretty spot on though. This completely feels like a natural sequel to the movie, if there was more content. There are only so many levels, and the last 3 stages are just mini-games with waves of enemies. With so few levels, the game can be beaten in a couple of hours if you know what you're doing. Feels like the amount of content sort of defeats the purpose for upgrades. These two hooligans have entire skill trees to upgrade, but I never noticed any of these upgrades making any noticeable difference, besides health upgrades of course. I just can't see why we needed an entire skill tree for them. The game of course comes with some bonuses. A trailer for the movie, a trailer for the first game, a video of the developers talking about development again, a trailer for Toy Story, and a trailer for Cars, which I enjoyed the most here. The last fight against the Underminer actually took a few attempts, due to Mr. Incredible constantly dying on me. I would go through the levels of the game here, like I did with the first game, but I swear they're literally all the same thing here, except when you have to escort this robot, but the rest is copy and paste. With the first Incredibles doing so well on the Game Boy, Rise of the Underminer being released on the Game Boy and the newly released Nintendo DS was all but guaranteed. The gameplay on the Game Boy, at least with Mr. Incredible, was already solid. All they have to do is copy that over and they have a good game. I mean, it's too easy to fail. They failed. Lightning doesn't strike twice. Rise of the Underminer for the Game Boy is okay. Just like the console version, it's pretty unremarkable and very forgettable. By no means a bad game. Rise of the Underminer on the Game Boy follows the same story and lets you control Mr. Incredible and Frozone through underground areas. Fighting off the Underminer's robots, there are 9 stages here, broken into 3 sections for reusable assets. Frozone can freeze enemies. Really? Which is super helpful for the harder enemies. I found myself taking on way more than I could handle as Mr. Incredible alone. I played on the hardest difficulty, as I always do, and it was seriously hard. Swarms of enemies that Mr. Incredible can't knock down on his own. Any enemy with ranged attacks makes everything worse here. All the enemies are the same throughout the game. And just like the console counterpart, it is rinse and repeat. I mean, you can say that about the first game too, but there are several unique stages and parts where you have to figure out how to move on in the first game. In either version of the Underminer, it's all the same thing. And I'll still never understand why there's 3 ice levels underground. It should be getting hotter, not colder. And the DS version does the same thing. I actually think the DS version is worse, despite having nicer graphics. If you can call them graphics. I mean, the game doesn't even use the second screen. I thought the Game Boy version was a lot simpler, and that the combat was way more fun. As fun as it is dying all the time, either version has you changing back and forth between the two characters for certain parts. Whether you need Mr. Incredible to lift something, or Frozone to freeze a platform to progress. In combat, I still liked Frozone more. Death was a real threat here, and Frozone immobilizing enemies made everything so much easier again. Frozone is the best character, hands down. Screw Bob. Unfortunately, Frozone didn't make it any easier understanding the Frozen levels, though. It's practically the exact same game as the Game Boy version, so I won't stay on this too long. Every version of Rise of the Underminer that was released got pretty mixed reviews, which is pretty much in line with what I thought of it all. Speaking of mediocrity, Pixar decided that they weren't done with the Incredibles games. Years later, in 2012, Pixar Connect Rush Adventure was released exclusively for the Kinect. After Sonic Free Riders, I just can't respect it anymore. Playing through 5 Pixar adventures, including Cars and Toy Story, here you get to jump into the Incredibles and take on the Omnidroid. Since nobody uses the Kinect anymore, the game was re-released in 2017 and is now available on Game Pass. The game is much better with a controller, though each story is only going to get you about 25 minutes. The Incredibles here feels like a Disney virtual roller coaster more than it feels like an actual game. The characters needlessly ask you to help them. I mean, the only character you actually help is Violet. The level with Dash feels incredibly redundant. Dash could have done everything here on his own. Hell, even Violet could have used her shield to get through these lasers. Don't even get me started on Mr. Incredible here. He throws objects at you just so you can throw them at the Omnidroid. I mean, just do it yourself! Rush Adventure hardly feels like a real game, though the graphics are impressive for what it is, especially when I had just gotten done playing Rise of the Underminer. But don't worry, this next game is incredibly competent. Going back to its roots with the first Incredibles game, this next game has incredible graphics, incredible gameplay, and it even has Frozone as a playable character. Out of all of those points, they still couldn't even give me Frozone. Disney Infinity was released in August 2013, and boy, is it something. Why sell just the game when you can sell toys too? Genius! I've already said once in this video that kids are stupid. Hell, if they released a Sega Infinity, I would have bought it. Others have done the same thing, from Skylanders to Amiibo, though Disney had a huge character roster to pull from. The Incredibles was included in the first edition, 1.0. Playing through the Incredibles playset requires having at least Mr. Incredible, which should be a given, and playing as any other character requires buying their toy too. Until the Gold Editions were finally released in 2016 to keep the game somewhat alive. I mean, they're still playable on Steam to this day. Hell, you don't even need the toys. The game didn't last long. Once the developer Avalanche shut down, so did Disney Infinity. Thank God they can't keep ripping off our kids. And by extension, us. I would much rather have kids fall victim to in-game loot crates. I love virtual gambling with children. The Incredibles in Disney Infinity is competent enough, with decent replayability and building, and decent combat too. Plus, you get to bully everyone living here, and they love it! That's masochism. Besides the main storyline, beating syndrome, everything else here gets really repetitive, but that's to be expected when going into this. It's always, hey Mr. Incredible, go put out this fire. Hey Mr. Incredible, go stop this robber. Hey Mr. Incredible, go stop this alien plant from putting all the civilians asleep while simultaneously not having any effect on you. Wait, what? It's never, hey Mr. Incredible, how are you? If you have a bored kid, this'll occupy them for a while, especially with every playset. It is a decent enough game, but if you're like me and you're only playing for one playset, you can get away with the 2 hours Steam gives you before a refund. That's not what I did. I definitely beat the Incredibles playset in its entirety for the sake of making a well-informed video. What the? Okay, look, I never claimed to be a truthful person. Hell, I think being a hypocrite is fun. On top of Disney Infinity 1.0, there was also Disney Infinity Toy Box Challenge on the Nintendo DS. There isn't much to say here as far as the Incredibles go, with Mr. Incredible being playable, and players can also play at Metroville docks. It's a serviceable enough board game, but it's effectively just Mario Party with Disney characters. It's a real shame Disney didn't include this with the Gold Edition on Steam. I hate when remasters and collections don't add as much as they can. Like how Mario 3D All-Stars just couldn't come with Galaxy 2. Speaking of collections, a collection of The Incredibles and Rise of the Underminer, with all of their respective versions, would be great. Guess what we're never getting? Disney Infinity is a well-made game, but if it wasn't so big at the time, the gameplay would make damn sure it's forgettable. But an open world Incredibles game does sound pretty incredible. Going around solving crimes and puzzles, it's a shame Disney Infinity couldn't deliver everything it wanted to. I mean, you can't even play as Frozone. I'm not saying this is a sin, but I'm not saying I'm happy about it. Sadly, this idea of an open world Incredibles game never did come to fruition. Until it did. In 2018, the best Incredibles game so far was released. LEGO The Incredibles. And you get to play as Lucius Best! The game is open world, fighting crimes and putting out fires. Sounds a lot like Disney Infinity, but this game does it so well. Being able to change through a wide range of characters and playing through the story of both movies. I mean, you can even fight the Underminer in the first level, because now that entire game is non-canon. Couldn't they have just made the second movie after Rise of the Underminer? The second movie is my least favorite part of the entire series, with Underminer somewhere in between. I had planned on returning this to Steam after 2 hours of gameplay, but I found myself keeping it. It's seriously fun. None of the jokes fall flat, the gameplay is fast, and the combat doesn't overstay its welcome. The puzzles are as fun as you can expect from any other LEGO game, and the graphics look great. We even get to see Gazer Beam. He's supposed to be dead. If anyone can resurrect the dead for more sales and a 2-player level, it's gotta be Disney. Just like any LEGO game, this game is a lot of fun even after you finish the storyline, though it does start to fall off a bit after that. There's only so many robbers I can beat up, fires I can put out, and mini-kits to collect before I quit. LEGO The Incredibles starts us off fighting the Underminer, using the entire family, and Frozone this time. They finally learn from their mistakes. And then we're shown the open world. I unlocked Dory, and I moved on to the motorcycle level. It feels super cool, with the second player being the little drone over there. Though some of it is automated, it never feels like it. Electrix is the next playable character in the next level, which takes place on a train against the Screenslaver. But the next part is incredible. The first boss fight of the game, Jack against the raccoon. This was the moment I knew this game is incredible. Getting to see Jack put the fear of God into this raccoon makes every other bad Incredibles moment throughout the years completely worth it. After this, we play as Mrs. Incredible and Electrix again, but this time it is much more fun, on a crashing plane. The atmosphere in this game is subpar at worst and incredible at best. I spent way too long on this boss fight in the house, just trying to figure out how to get over the gap. Finally, the end of the second story comes, and they save the day from a damn boat. This game is incredible, but I never thought the story of the second movie was very good. It never feels like the stakes are all that high. But now we get to play through the first movie, thank God. The boss fight against Bon Voyage, incredible. Playing as Buddy, way better than Mr. Incredible. The burning building is the best version of it so far, of only 2, with random goons added to the stage again. Frozone has to keep drinking water in order to stay hydrated. A reminder to all of my viewers to stay hydrated. The jungle level is made much more fun with Frozone. And honestly, it's really pretty here too. I think Frozone being here just kind of works, and I wish he'd been in this part of the movie too. The Omnidroid boss fight wasn't as fun as the first game, but you can't win them all. Disney resurrects Gazer Beam from the dead, and we infiltrate Syndrome's base. Playing as Edna will never get old. We skydive as the kids, infiltrate Syndrome's base again, and suddenly we're at the end of the game, with way more puzzles than the rest of the game put together. I mean, the entire boss fight is nothing but puzzles. I like puzzles throughout the stages, but for boss fights, I appreciate the first game and Underminer way more. Still, this game is the better one. The open world here does a lot of the same that Disney Infinity did, but this one does it right. With more mobility, so many vehicles to unlock and drive around, and so many more characters to choose from. And playing as Tony Baloney is my favorite thing any Incredibles game did. It's now one of my favorite LEGO games, next to Star Wars, of course. At their worst, the Incredible games are mediocre. At their best, they're incredible. Now all we need to seal the deal here is a game entirely about Frozone, and of course a movie with it. And I'm sure that's exactly what Disney Pixar is working on right now. I'll settle for another LEGO The Incredibles game, as long as we don't get another Disney Infinity. Hey guys, I'm Fez Yep. Thank you so much for watching the video. Now I know it took 8 months to come out, and I just figured for my 13 subscribers, they deserve an explanation. The truth is, I just didn't give a shit for 8 months. But recently, I decided to give a shit. And the video only took about 3 weeks to finish. Now I do have a problem with the video, in that my critique of The Incredibles for the console versions, that their cutscenes were compressed video files. In the video, I talked about how that's a problem, when I didn't realize at the time that they literally have cutscenes with the in-game models, and I just chose to overlook that when making the video. You also may have noticed my background has changed. Now, we recently moved, and this should be the background for any future videos, until I move again. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in the next video.